Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to whichever part of the world everyone's signing in from. Here we are with the second panel discussion in the webinar series Creativity and Essential Catalyst for Education. And many of you have already benefited from round one, and we have four distinguished panelists in this round, each of them very experienced in their field. I will quickly begin with their introductions and brace yourselves uh, as I read through them. They have a lot of work behind them. So I'll begin with Christopher Clowder. For nearly 22 years, Christopher Clowder was the founder and CEO of the European Council for Steiner Waldorf Education, which represents around 710 schools in 27 countries. He was also a member and chair of the executive group of the Steiner Schools Fellowship for the UK and Ireland for 2 decades until 2010. Before this, he started his career as a teacher working with children in a Steiner school for special needs. He has founded and taught in Waldorf schools in the Netherlands and the UK. He is a long-standing member of the International Forum for Steiner Schools and a fellow of the Learning for Wellbeing community in Brussels. He is the mentor at 2 schools in France, an advisor for a school in Spain, and also an advisor to the European Network of Steiner Waldorf Parents. Christopher was also the founding director of a platform for innovation in education, which published 4 reports that survey and evaluate social and emotional education in 21 countries. The platform is active in inspiring and empowering teachers to develop creative and innovative methods and practices in their classrooms to meet the needs of contemporary children. He has lectured widely, written and compiled books and many articles, and at international conferences, not only on Steiner education but also on other educational and cultural subjects. In 1997, he co-founded the Alliance for Childhood, a global network which campaigns for the right of young children to be allowed to experience their childhood in a healthy and fulfilling way. He has co-authored, edited and co-edited 17 books on education, creativity, and childhood. He has made many presentations in the European Union and was instrumental in securing public funding for Steiner education in England. He has also worked closely with educational policymakers in the UK and Europe and negotiated with them, shared platforms with many academicians, worked as a school consultant, and is considered as the authority in Steiner and creative education. Welcome, Christopher Clowder.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you on this panel. Then we have Dr. Leena Deshpande, who is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician based in Navi Mumbai, backed by over 25 years of experience, a decade of which was also spent in the UK. So there's a common UK work connect between Christopher and Leena. She's the founder of ICANN Child Developmental Center in Kharghar, Navi Mumbai, and a visiting consultant in the area of developmental pediatrics at 3 leading hospitals in Mumbai and Navi Mumbai. She is the Joint National Coordinator for TOT Neurodevelopmental Disorders, Best Zone Convener for TOT Autism and Poor Scholastic Performance, and National Co-Convener for RACE TOT. She is a member of the task force by the Indian Academy of Pediatricians for IAP National Consensus Guidelines on ADHD, autism, newborn hearing screening, and learning disability. She's also a member of the accreditation committee for institutes applying for IAP fellowship program in neurodevelopmental pediatrics. A faculty at various forums on topics related to neurodevelopmental pediatrics. She is the academic editor for the IAP Handbook of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics and the associate editor for the Indian Journal of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. A warm welcome, Dr. Leena.
Thank you, Ritika.
Always good to have the medical perspective. That makes every conversation more credible.
Thank you.
I'll then come to Vandana Basu ma'am to give us a localized perspective on creativity in education. She's the co-founder of Shishya Waldorf School, a teacher with nearly 3 decades of experience. Vandana Basu is the co-founder, mentor, and teacher trainer at Shishya Waldorf School, based in Navi Mumbai again. She holds postgraduate degrees in textile studies, commerce, and computer software systems. However, she found her calling when she stepped into the world of teaching and was placed right in the midst of children. Since then, she has been led by her teaching journey, which progressed vertically as well as horizontally in terms of depth and quality of education. She parted ways with mainstream education as the deputy director of an international school and co-founded Shishya Waldorf School in 2016, a haven dedicated to nurturing the whole being of children. Being trained in Waldorf education methods over these years, she has taken the first batch of her grade school years and has only become more deeply committed to the health fortifying uniqueness of Waldorf education. Welcome, Vandana ma'am. Always good to keep hearing from you. And even though it seems like internet hasn't been very kind to Vijay, we will still go over the introduction because as he joins, we can just continue with our conversation. So Vijay Dalwani is our panelist from the industry today. He's an entrepreneur, mentor, and consultant. Vijay has built, established, and operated multifarious companies and organizations in various sectors such as information technology, banking, hospitality, esports, wellness, and lifestyle, among others. In his journey, he has gained experience across diverse functional areas such as operations, sales, customer engagement and retention, process management, recruitment and training, business expansion and growth, leadership and people management. He has built businesses and set up teams from scratch and has led and managed teams of up to 500 people. Today, he provides services like management consulting, strategic planning, leadership development, and change management to organizations, startups, and multinational companies, contributing to the growth of various startups in different sectors. He also helps young entrepreneurs set up their business operations. Interestingly, he has also always pursued his passion in music, bike riding, and road travel alongside his professional work. So, when we hear from him. So, let's set the ball rolling with Dr. Leena and really take a step back in seeing where are we today with regards to children, because we are all here to discuss what is wholesome for children. And Dr. Leena, in her practice, meets a variety of children with a variety of challenges that their parents are facing on a daily basis. Please tell us more about it, Dr. Leena.
Thank you, Ritaparna. I think it's a pleasure to be here on this panel discussing this topic of children in this forum. So, almost 3 decades back, when I was doing my MD Pediatrics, my residency in Mumbai, the whole focus and the whole training that we went through was on infections, because that's what we used to see a lot: tuberculosis, malaria, etc. And we got so much training around this because that was what was around. But when it came to things like autism or developmental disorders or ADHD, dyslexia, at that time, we felt all these were some weird and wonderful problems of the West. So this is what our training was, 3 decades back, or our understanding was 3 decades back. And then I went to the UK and I was there for almost 10 years. And what I realized was it was a case of more of a case of what the mind doesn't know, the eye doesn't see. So when I came back to India, this was around, I think, 2006, I realized it's obviously prevalent in our children as well. Developmental disorders are obviously there in our children as well. Now, if we just take the autism diagnosis, the incidence or the prevalence that we talked about 20 years back was somewhere like 1 in 10,000. And now it is 1 in 100. So that's a huge, huge jump. And the reasons for increasing prevalence or incidence are multifactorial. And we probably won't go into that in this forum. And of course, we are picking up early symptoms and milder symptoms. But the statement that there's certainly many more children with developmental, behavioral, emotional issues or disorders is definitely true. So when I'm looking at these rising numbers of behavioral or emotional disorders, let's understand that what we know is child's developmental and behavioral outcome is always an interplay of nature and nurture. So, what is nature? Nature is what the child is born with, the genetics, and nurture is what we, the adults in his family, the parents, the extended family, the teachers, the doctors, do about that genetic. This is called as epigenetics, how environment shapes the genetics of a child. And I think before even this epigenetics was understood by the scientific community, I think our Bollywood community always knew about this, because we've seen so many of these Bollywood movies where identical twins are separated at birth. They grow up in different environment, and they have a different outcome. So, maybe we can't do anything with respect to genetics, but if we want to change the trajectory of a child, if we want to change the outcome, if we want to decrease or improve the developmental or the behavioral or the emotional issues that the child is facing, certainly we need to look at what can be done by us to help improve these concerns.
That was a great foundation for uh, our conversation, Dr. Leena, and it really gives us a perspective of the magnitude of where we are even seeing a challenge in the absence of maybe a right nurturing environment, or at least maybe able to help impact this situation with the right nurturance. Let's move on to Christopher. So, you have a huge body of work behind you in the area of social and emotional education. And you mentioned in one of your talks that you yourself had grown up post the World War and had the benefit of a creative education. And thereafter, as an adult, you have done a lot of work in this area, right from policymakers to teachers and parents. Tell us more about it. What is the impact of education you see in on society and economy at large?
I think a lot of our educational policies are living in the past and not dealing with the questions that Dr. Lena pointed out, the children of the present. Somehow, education is a field which can be very stuck in different, in old perspectives. But childhood has changed in the last decades. Children's experience of childhood is not the same as it was generations ago. It's a very, very different world. It's a very stressful world for many more children in many ways. And somehow we haven't changed the way we run schools or the pedagogical impulse in the schools to meet the needs of today's children. And I think that gives rise to great problems. I know in our country, for instance, the whole question of anxiety, mental stress, mental health is now growing and growing as a theme of discussion because children are suffering. And I think, in my political work, all children in the world have a right to flourish and become what they want to be. And we hold many of them back. And I think this is bad for not just the families and the children themselves, but also for the future of society. In my work, in my travels I've done, I've looked at the whole question of the arts in education. And there's no doubt at all that an arts-rich curriculum benefits children. The evidence over the last 20, 25 years is formidable that if schools develop an arts-rich curriculum, everything changes. The children are more pro-social, there's less bullying, there is less stress, and remarkably, children do better academically by having theatre, drama, gardening, filmmaking, music, whatever. In bringing those into school life, children find more relevance to their own inner development. And that is part of what Dr. Lena pointed out, epigenetics, the surroundings of the child, the expectation that every child is gifted in some way or another. Every child brings something into the world. And the school should be a place where that is recognized and supported, not channeling them in the way we often do in a very functionalized, mechanized way into a certain lifestyle or certain examinations, endlessly tested and measured, because that is to the detriment of their personal development very often. And then we get the problems that we've highlighted already today. So this has been my work, and I think we have to fight this, that children are not getting what they need in today's society.
Thank you for making this problem statement even more precise, Christopher. Vandana ma'am, you see children at school every day. You also speak to new parents and existing parents very often. Tell us, how do we stand today with regard to children, with regard to how education is influencing them and how the overall environment is influencing children?
So, picking up from what Christopher just said, uh, times that we are in is very different from the times that were before. And he's very right that if we do not consider evolving in our educational practices, we end up being very stuck. Children today are the nature of childhood has not changed. Their needs have not changed, but the world has changed. The expectations with which parents come to the world of education, the way they expect children to perform when it comes to school and academics, that is definitely a question and a concern oftentimes. The one thing that we can tell you is that the difference of being in a Waldorf school is definitely an advantage to us, because here we see parents more receptive to an alternative path of the learning experience children can have. But when we compare it with the mainstream, it is just about what Christopher said should not be the prerogative, where it is all about assessments, exams, marks, being competitive. Apart from being competitive in the school-based exams, we see children jumping out, or parents pushing children into further competitive, national level competitive exams, be it the sciences and the maths. Somewhere there is a bias towards the sciences when it compares to the arts. And there is something which society needs to rethink about, because um, when we think about how children perform, not everyone is made to be a scientist or having the contemporary version of scientific thinking. But there is a bent where parents always consider, especially in India, we know this to be true, that engineering, medicine, these are the streams most parents are looking for their children to go into. And what we fail to realize is how, apart from what the academic world is creating or the education departments are doing, we as family, we as parents, who are supposed to be the most primal, love, nurturing, providing people, end up burdening children with certain expectations. So what I see from the outside world, considering that I've spent a significant amount of years in mainstream education, and from there, when I stepped into the world of education, I find it more healing even for myself, because I see that parents do come with a different understanding. They are more receptive to the new ways in which we teach children, the different ways in which we teach children. So probably that is where I will stop myself for now.
You spoke about nature versus nurture, and I think that's the Dr. Leena,
you were muted, so we couldn't hear the first part of yours, what you said.
Oh, I'm really sorry. I unmuted as I spoke.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So it was assuring to hear what Vandana ma'am said in terms of the willingness for change, or maybe the potential shifting consciousness. So you spoke about nature versus nurture earlier, and I think that is the potent point of change, right? And that lies in the nurture. Nature is about acceptance, but nurture is the space where we can do a lot. So what do you see some common challenges in children's environment, or when you consult children with challenges or neurodevelopmental, let's say, delays or deviations? What are the common things in their environment do you look for, or do you recommend changes in to parents and teachers?
Okay, I think I'm going to talk a little bit earlier than that. So So if we look at today's topic, or today's in the child development context, what we know is that there is a huge importance of the early years in the child's life. Okay, the first 5 to 7 years, and in that as well, the first 1,000 days, huge importance is given, because this is the time which is most important for laying foundation for their further healthy growth and development. A child's first 1,000 days of life, which includes, as soon as a child is conceived, first 2 years and then first 3 years, this is a time when the child's not only physical but brain growth is happening very rapidly. So as brain development grows, a child's brain grows up to 80% of adult size by the age 3 years. So a lot of things are happening in the first 3 to 5 years of life in the child's brain. In the first couple of years of life, there are various synapses, the nerve connections in the brain, which are rapidly increasing in quantity, in quality of connections. And that is how a child develops in different areas. So he starts walking, he starts talking, playing, understanding in the first 2 to 3 years of life. So being when because I'm a developmental pediatrician, many parents ask me, is there a brain tonic or something like that which can enhance my child's brain development? Okay, if the first 2 3 years are so important, can I give him some brain tonic which can help him? I mean, of course, a good balanced diet, nutrition, foods rich in iron, calcium, vitamin D are all essential for a child's growth and development. But let's understand there is no such brain tonic as such. In the market with a chemist, we might find, a shelf full of brain tonics, but that's just marketing. But we all have what I call a superpower. This is called as neuroplasticity. This is brain science and this is brain tonic. All our brains have this incredible capacity to change in response to environment or external stimulation. So this external stimulation comes from the environment. And we know that the first 3 years of life is the single most transformative period in the entire lifespan for brain development. The rate at which in the first 3 years a brain is developing, it never ever happens ever in life again. So the neural circuits, the nerves, they are going from simple to complex. The synapses, the points where they join, they are all doubling in the first 2 to 3 years of life. And then what happens? Pruning happens. So what nature does is, areas which are not being used by the infant are pruned away. And these processes are all invisible and silent, so we can't see them. But this pruning is dependent on what input you are getting from the environment. The areas which are stimulated by the environment, from the environment, are strengthened, and the ones which are not are pruned away or become weaker and decrease. Now, do we need any tonics, money, expensive toys, gadgets, apps for this? Absolutely not. That's what the marketing people who have convinced us. All that is needed is good, motivated adult who can give quality time to interact with a child. And the best way to stimulate a child's development, imagination, creativity is through play, interactive, creative play. So I think we need to understand that play plays is the best tonic for a child in this early infancy and the first 3 to 4 years of life. But again, the parents and teachers and families have to understand that, and I think know that there are various levels of play, and we cannot jump those levels of play. So, for example, when a child is an infant, it's called exploratory play. The child explores the environment through his senses. He examines objects by looking at them, by touching with his hands, by putting in the mouth, by listening, and by moving around. So mouthing toys, climbing on furniture, all these are part of this exploratory play, which is normal. And we need to give opportunities at this time, because this will later on help with balance and coordination. Then comes this non-functional play, where the child plays with toys and objects by throwing or banging them together. They just keep doing this, putting in and out of container kind of play, around say 12 to 15 months of age. At this age, if we try to give them a very fancy, expensive car or a toy, all that the child is going to do is end up banging it and breaking it. Okay, so don't expect a child who's in a non-functional play area, stage or age to play very nicely with your expensive or fancy toy. Now, around maybe 15 to 18 months of age, the child starts playing functionally. This is called functional play, where he plays with the toys in a way that you would expect. So, if you give a car, he will push a car, he will press the buttons, he starts imitating parents, he tries to copy how the parents play. And then comes the most exciting play, which is pretend play, where the child starts acting out whatever they have seen, like feeding a dolly, pouring tea in a cup. And then gradually this all expands, where the child imagines himself to be a doctor or a shopkeeper, which this all starts by 2 years of age. And then around 4 or 5 years of age is where games with rules are understood by the child. So a birthday party game, problem solving games, board games, it's 5 years and so. So all this creative processes through play is what a child needs for healthy development. And if that is not happening in his environment, if we are substituting toys, the toys, an adult social play, the interactive play with gadgets, with the passive stimulation, then that's where the problem happens. If we start, to be honest, I've seen so many children who can identify, name colors at 18 months of age or 15 months of age, but they don't know ball. So I think we need to be very careful about what we are going to give them in their environment. Is that all right, Ritu?
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. That was pretty much what felt very healing in the context of the conversation. That and I always say that I'm a parent first. So I was imagining these 100 conversations where parents see that when a box of toys are given to a child and it is unboxed, the child is always more interested in the box than the toy. Yet
Absolutely.
hundreds of toys are bought in and there is clutter.
Absolutely.
That makes the environment even more messy. The parent is stressed and the child doesn't have still any willingness to play. So, so what you said pretty much addressed what is missing. I think the only thing that needs to be present is the adult.
Yeah.
And,
An active, motivated adult. So an adult with on his phone and the child playing in the background is not something which is ideal. Yeah, somebody who's interactive with the child. Yeah.
And I agree that what Christopher also said in the previous round, that times are challenging. Like the parents have to work on screens vis-a-vis earlier times, where the parents would be seen more doing more of physical work, or grandparents would be present in the ecosystem, at least in previous generations in India. So now the reason to become even more conscious about it in what we are doing to children once we have them. So moving on to Christopher, tell us when a child, like you have mentioned in one of your articles, that children are born with that potential. It's a question of nurturing, developing, stimulating that further, their ability to create, innovate, to think critically, to problem solve, etc. Tell us, how do you see education shaping these attributes and the willingness to engage in children?
Just coming back to Dr. Lena's terminology of a brain tonic, I think the best brain tonic for children is love and security. And that's really the foundation. And that should also be the foundation of the whole educational practice as well. But those positive aspects of our humanness come to the fore, and that being educated is a joy, not a stress. School should be a place of joy. And if we look at children's play, they have the wisdom. They play. Why do they play. If that's not destroyed, sometimes, of course, childhood is destroyed. Conflict, poverty, war, that is taken away. That childhood is stolen from children. But a child who's loved and feels secure plays. And that is an impulse that is a foundation, as Dr. Lena said, for our whole future life. That ability to play. We all play. Yeah. What is a film? What is a theatre? What is a football match? What is a novel? If it's not play, we play with words. We play with colour. We play with our body, our arms, our legs. Playfulness. Children experience that, and it develops into an adult sense of playfulness. And out of that comes our creativity. Yeah. So this faculty of imagination, I think this is what is ignored in so much educational discourse and practice, that we have to be imaginative. We have to create things in our soul and a hope for the future through our imagination, a different future for our imagination, problem solving through imagination. Science also is a basis on our imaginative faculties, and schools should strengthen that, not weaken it, by putting it into boxes which we can measure and categorize and say this child is like this, because that's always a generalization. Children do come with their character, yes? And it's not nature versus nurture, as it used to be termed. It's nature and nurture. And we have to somehow wed the two, that the education we give the child is what that child actually needs. And that's where we need the freedom. A big state curriculum ignores those differences. And we have to be free enough as professionals and educators and as families to meet the needs of the child we actually have in front of us, which means not having a goal or an exam or a test. Of course, children need challenges. Yeah, I think that's fine. We all need challenges. It helps us develop. It helps us in our process of becoming to have a challenge. We learn about our strengths, our weaknesses. We learn about how we interrelate with all the other humans in the world. That's a challenge. These are challenges. But the way they're now constructed acts against the artistic and creative and imaginative freedom of children. And Dr. Lena used the word competitive. And I think this is very strange. We need a world of cooperation. We need a world where we all work together for the betterment of the humans and the animals and the climate and everything else. We need this sense of togetherness, of cooperation. And yet we bring up children to have competition between each other, to be the best. And if you always have the best, you always have the weakest. And that child then is victimized in a way. If you're not the best, somehow you failed. And I've seen heart-rending, 6-year-olds thinking they've failed their parents. And you think, what sort of damage does that do to a 6-year-old to feel they're worthless because they haven't got such a grade or a star or whatever? So I think it's necessary for a very fundamental reform. It's a reform of consciousness, because it's how we create structures out of how we see ourselves. Our schools, our institutions, our governments are created out of our imagination, how we imagine ourselves to be. That's the basis of all culture. All cultures are imagined. We agree on things that we imagine, like money. We agree money has a value, but it doesn't. It's a coin or a bit of paper. It doesn't. But we imagine it has a value, and we all agree on that imagination. So imagination stands really at the basis of being human, and now we have to imagine things as different. Where can we go from here? How can we take families and teachers and professionals with us to reimagine what education could be? And in my work in social emotional education, where I've traveled the world seeing examples of this, I saw the most inspiring schools, the most inspiring teachers, some with very little, no facilities, no artistic equipment, and yet through their imagination and embracing the child's imagination, they could create a completely new atmosphere and a learning process. Give an example in Brazil. I was in a school where the head teacher wouldn't give the children any paper or crayons, and yet they had to teach art. So the teacher didn't know what to do. So what she did, she put clotheslines in her classroom and told each child to bring their favorite T-shirt. They all bought a T-shirt, and she hung them on the clotheslines. And then the children looked at them with wonder because all the colors were there. And that became an art lesson. They didn't have paper. They didn't have crayons. They were very poor. And yet out of that moment, you could see in the child's faces an awakening. Ah, these colors, all different. And they started talking about colors. Or another part in Sao Paulo, the children were asked to look for beauty. Sao Paulo is not a beautiful city. Do you know where the children found it? In the cracks of the pavement where the plants were growing. Little plants sprouting out of the concrete. They found beauty by their feet, which they passed every day and began to explore that world. That's creativity, and that sets a basis, because that goes, as Lena said, in the early years, right into the child. The world is wonderful. The world is full of wonders, and that's what we've got to enhance, not take away, not detract, but enhance that sense of the world is wonderful, and especially with the young child. They have come with that. They come, if you look at their eyes, they see the world is wonderful. Why do we take it away? Why do we steal that from them? Why don't we build on it in our educational practices?
And I just add on here one of a personal experience. I'm a parent of two boys. They are both older now. I mean, one is 25 years and other one is 20 years old. But I think around 15 years back, when younger one was 5 and 10, they were 10 and 5 years, they both wanted to learn table tennis. Okay, and I had taken them to a teacher who taught table tennis kind of a thing, and he looked at my younger one and he said, "Oh, this one is fine. I can train him." And he looked at my older one and I said, "Oh no, the age has gone. I can't train him." So he was looking at it from a perspective of competition, getting him to compete other than the joy of actually playing table tennis. And this is not a one-off thing. I think this happens everywhere in most cases where activities are done, children are scheduled for competitive activities rather than learning for the sake of loving that learning process. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a powerful example, Dr. Lina. I see that around too, that sometimes you have to tell people that it's okay not to win. It's okay to just play, or it's okay to not become the best, but just be at it. So from what Christopher said and also Dr. Lina's example, I would like to connect two things and say here that intuitively we understand this, right? Like we see that children are in a state of imaginative wonder and so on. But maybe, like you said, because of the imagination that adults have about the world and about the future of the world, we tend to believe that if we don't educate or train right from 1 or 2 years old in a certain way, they will not be fit for this competitive world, especially in this age of science and technology. This is something I'm literally stealing from the mouth of parent, and I have heard interpretations of this all over. I'm sure many parents would resonate with this. That, okay, how do they take up competitive jobs that are logical in nature and that require critical problem-solving skills? So I would just read something from what Einstein said, and I also got that from one of Christopher's talks, and I'll then pass it on to you, Vandana ma'am. I'm sure you'll resonate with this from what you see in school. So just give me a second. Yeah, so Einstein said that his achievements were about finding that childlike quality in himself: zest for life, sense of discovery, hope for the future, a sense of wonder, spontaneity, openness, no preconceived conclusions, how to reinvent childhood in yourself, and rebuild that lost connection with children. So if Einstein said that, can we be far from it? So Bandana ma'am, tell us again something from school that really reassures that this sense of wonder can eventually translate into learning science, problem solving, and you see children making projects. I have seen them too beautifully.
Okay, so let me begin with a direct conversation with the idea of this webinar, which is creativity. So, what does creativity really mean when we look at it from the children and childhood's perspective? So, I would say that creativity is a space where children are able to imagine something within themselves and also find the ability to find an expression of that in the outside world. So be able to express it. And what is important here is that we notice that children should be able to visualize that imagination in a way that they find a way to express it. So there are two things that are happening at this time. One is an awareness of what is really happening inside, a connection with that, and a parallel connection with a language which could be even spoken or otherwise, but a language of bringing it outside, an externalization of this in some way. So for me, I find that between these two, the one thing which is primal is the ability to go within yourself. For children to be able to go within themselves is the primal need of becoming creatively expressed. And if I think of then the word creativity or creative thinking, it also makes me think of it in a way that there needs to be an element of original thought. Now, this is very important when it comes to nurturance. Like I take the idea from Lena here. When we talk of nurturance, we really need to see the environment in which children are getting the opportunity to internalize and externalize the way things are moving today, the way things are with the I would say the intervention, or rather say interference of media in the world of children and childhood, the interference of industry and marketing and the gimmicks of it in the world of nurturance of children, a very sentimental space, because every person with spending power wants to give the best to their children. And this emotional quotient, emotional aspect, is completely exploited by that part of the world, the industrial world. And everything they want to sell, like even Lena was saying, the brain tonics available in the shelf, really don't have any space or work to do with children. What really works is, as already spoken by the other two guests here, that it's the quality of the one adult who's engaged with the child. Now, in that space, schools play a very important role. Children, like I borrowed the idea from Christopher, he said they need to feel safe. They need to feel secure in expressing themselves. It's a very wonderful thing if that is available at home, but it is so profound to have that space in a school. Because in the school, children definitely come with an expectation of validation from the one into whom they have rested their thinking. They have given that space to the teacher, the authority from whom they are learning. And when they express themselves in whichever way possible, sometimes a stone can be an egg for them, a stone can be a crystal for them. But when they come to the teacher and express it, is there an acknowledgement and an acceptance from the teacher? This is pivotal when it comes to developing imagination and creativity in children. So when we are talking about how is creativity nurtured, we really have to understand that the adults in the child's world are so significant. The acceptance with which they receive this creative expression of children is so important. We do not diminish what they bring forward as, oh, but that's not that, you see, it's a stone. We don't do that to them, because then is where we have killed this. The other threat that comes forward when it comes to the idea of creativity is the media. The media is a third person's expression of an idea, and when children are allowed to guzzle that in, constantly taking in, it blurs what they see as what is their imagination and what is the other's imagination. And oftentimes they are not able to separate this. So again, nurturance needs to know that this is possibly going to be more harmful than helpful. So we have so many packages, so many as devices, and so many, I would say, programs available and all of those things. But is it right for children to have it at the right time? I have really immense gratitude to Lina for breaking down how the play of childhood has its own stages, and at how certain months and years of life, in the initial years, children play differently. And that is because they are in a different kind of consciousness at that time. Every part of their growing period, they are in a different consciousness. If education can recognize this, if the grown-ups understand this, they actually become the right contributors to this development. In a school, when we recognize age appropriateness, then is when we actually connect with children. When the right imagination is served at the right age, then we are aligning children and taking them forward. But when the wrong kind of imagination is, I would say, thrust down their throat at the wrong time, then we are harming children. So, like Christopher already spoke about, assessments and examinations and all these things. This is not the time. Childhood is not the time when we bring that to them. But yes, there is a time when we turn them into a space where they learn to work with challenge, which is very moderated. And children are able to express their capacities, grow their capacities, challenge their own selves in the right way, and then grow in that capacity, be it an assessment, be it creative expression. So when you spoke about projects and things that children have to do, yes, it is all complementary to what they are learning. It is not an additional separately created opportunity for children. But when they are learning something and a project is assigned to them and they work on that project, but they draw the understanding from what they learned in the lessons in the class, we see that children are actually bringing their inner understanding and the externalization of it, and these two artistic attributes come together. So for me, when I look at how education should be, again, I sometimes cannot help myself but go back into where I was before Waldorf education happened to me and to where I am today. So what would a standard lesson look like for a child? A standard lesson in the outside world would be where there's a textbook and a teacher is going to, talk about that chapter. She turns the pages. There are exercises over there. There are activities mentioned over there. And she kind of aligns herself to the work designed in the textbook. But imagine a situation where the textbook is taken away and only a context is given that a child at a certain time should be learning these things. So the teacher becomes free to teach the way she wants. Where do you think her focus will shift? It is now going to go back to the children. She knows what she has to teach them, but she also is going to look at the children and wonder, how do I do it so a A in the class and a B and a C and a D in the class are all going to get the maximum that can be drawn out of this lesson? So this entire shift of focus from the content that needs to be delivered to the way in which this content needs to be delivered. This is what I feel one of the artistic elements of being a Waldorf teacher. And the teacher's artistic abilities to create a lesson is another opportunity for the child to meet art. So the teacher being present moment to moment, context to context, alive in the classroom, the child is seeing art being created. And this is again, like one of you mentioned here, it's a very subtle experience. It's not overt, it's very subtle. It's getting absorbed in the child's being so silently, but at the right time, it finds its expression once again. So, again, in another way, we see that art is becoming a very important part of learning. When you mentioned the projects, I want to say that it is in a world of classroom that a child is learning so many different forms of arts. It's impossible to actually be able to enlist everything. Like, let's take a few for example. They learn music, singing, dancing. They learn the handworks, which are hard crafts, soft crafts. They learn clay modeling, poetry, literature, storytelling, being heard directly, created on the moment by the teacher. So the teacher knows what she wants to tell as a story, but it is an element of spontaneity with which she works at that time. Painting by in different ways, drawing, dramatics, gardening. And thankfully, in a city like Mumbai, we in our school have a patch of land we convert into a small backyard gardening space. We have crop cycles happening. They learn house building, origami, dressmaking, and so much more. Now, why is it so important that they get an exposure to all these kind of activities and arts? Every craft that a child engages in is a different experience for the body. Every craft requires the child to adapt to what that material is with which the child is working. The material cannot change its nature, but it allows the child to evolve in its inner being and keep on adapting to a new material every time. As a quality, the child is becoming so adaptive that it can find its own space at any point in time, no matter where the child is placed. While that is one thing, there is a very different element of science which is also waking up. Every different element, every different material is also contributing to the child's senses, which the child is again through which building a reservoir of experiences inside itself. And in the later stages, when children are talking about or learning sciences or any of those, when we talk of hard learning, which is the maths and the sciences, there's so much reverence and reference that a child has within itself that it does not really now need to go anywhere else to recollect. Rather, the experiences speak to it from the inside in a subtle way. So, when the two things that education needs to recognize, one is the value of all these artistic elements and its contribution to cohesive understanding of learning, and also the fact that age appropriateness is so fundamental to creation of what a child is learning. Because what is learning? Like Rudolf Steiner said, all learning is self learning. A teacher can only bring it to the child, but the child has to create its own learning. So with that, I think the role of a school, the role of the experience that we give children as a part of learning is by itself making children more creative. Yes.
Sorry, it just takes me a while to mute and unmute us so that your conversation undisturbed. Yeah. That gives us a view of the school. At this stage, I would like to take a couple of questions that we have. The first question is for Dr. Leena. Parents sometimes push children towards more and more activity. Can you please comment if activity classes are a substitute for play? So this is something even I have seen. The moment we say we have to play more, so playing is now another activity class, a certain kind of play or a certain kind of activity that encourages pretend play. So
Correct.
even I had this question personally.
Absolutely. I mean, it is not. Okay, in one word, it is not, because when we talk about play, it needs to be free play. There are again various types of play. There are various ages where age appropriate play. But we talk about free play. Free play is where imagination and creativity will happen. Nowadays, what I find is a child is so busy. A child's schedule, a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, his schedule is even more tighter than my schedule, and I'm fairly busy. Okay, so they go early in the morning at 7, they come back at 3, then there is tuition class, and probably then there is a painting class, and then there is a gymnastics. And by the time the child has come back home, he's so tired, and then he might just plonk in front of, he and his parent who's accompanying him all these classes will plonk in front of the TV or the mobile, and then passive stimulation starts. So where is the time and space for the child to do think? There's no time for the child to think creatively. For a child to think creatively, a child needs to be bored, has nothing to do. This constant scheduling of activities in a structured activities may not allow the time for this. So I think allowing a child to be bored without having somebody else, whether it's an adult or the screen, giving constant stimuli to the child passively, is not play, is not creativity. And I think, as we said earlier, whatever is not used will be pruned away. So a child might become a little bit better in his painting or badminton, maybe, but there is no space for him to think for himself at all. I don't know whether I've been able to answer the question or not, but
Of course you did. Of course you did.
I mean, to be honest, I mean, there are a few things, again, I am so upset, I get very upset about is, different ways of teaching math, for example. There is one way of teaching math, and there are so many classes of teaching math which focuses on quantity and not quality. So how many sums can a child do in that 1 minute is the focus. And I think it's just so wrong. So I think let us not mix, or let us not confuse play, creativity, imagination with activities. Activities have their own place at a particular time, particular age. Sending a 3-year-old for a football class is not throwing a 3-year-old for swimming lessons. Enjoying swimming, enjoying water is different. Enjoying kicking a ball along is different. But a structured class at a particular age has to depend on whether the child has mastered the skill and the coordination and the balance that is needed for that particular age.
Thank you, Dr. Leena, for addressing that question really well. And I hear from parents again. So that, let's say a child has been enrolled in a swimming class at 3, then at 4 and 5, the parent and the teacher says there's a lot of improvement. And I was wondering, like, as if the 3-year-old was a defect. It's by default not. Of course, the child has developed, so they'll do more with water. But that's not like, maybe I'm pulling it too much, but that's what I wanted to say. Okay, so the next question, sorry. Just 1 second, the questions are actually not going. The next question is for Christopher. How do European Waldorf schools help nurture creativity in children, and how does it all help in various subjects like science later on? So, Christopher, I think this question is also coming from the space that the Waldorf movement is relatively recent in India. The oldest schools are maybe a little over 20 years, and there are many more on the brink which are in the space of, ma'am, what, 5 to 10 years, ma'am? Vandana, ma'am, would that be fair to say? Yeah. So, in that context, parents always want to know that this sounds great, but then how do they learn science and maths later? How do they learn like technical subjects later? Or how do they, let's say, build a career in something and so on? So, yeah, if you can throw some light on how have you seen schools in Europe where at that.
It's what Vandana said earlier, age appropriateness. There's a time when you really meet the needs of the child and they can pick it up extremely quickly. There's a time when reading, for instance, when the child is ready to read, then they read and read and read. It doesn't have to be forced into reading when they're not really ready. They're living in a different world inwardly. And the same with science. And I think a lot with the science, it comes through, again, this sense of wonder. But there's experimentation in the classroom or the laboratory, just light a flame, light a candle. What do you actually see? What is there in that flame? What are the colors? What does it do, that flame? And from that observation, this feeling, oh, this is amazing, this is a miracle, comes a theory. Yeah, not the other way around. You don't have the theory, say, I'm going to prove this theory with the children. You start with the actuality, something happening, and you say, what happened there? What did you see? And out of that, the children work with you to develop the theory. And that's much more, how can I say, something that children remember as an experience. It's experiential. Yes, science as experience to begin with. Later on, of course, when they get into the teens, then they have to work in the way that science is developed in many schools. But to begin with, the foundation is an experiential education. They feel something. They don't just think it. They feel and see it with their senses, or they smell it, whatever, something burning, or whatever. And so out of that relationship to the world, the science is developed. The more abstract science then can be built on that later. That's the foundation. Now, of course, in the Steiner schools, we don't, there isn't actually a fixed curriculum. The curriculum is a suggestion out of 100 years experience. We've now 1,500 schools around the world in 70 countries. We're always developing experience, and it's very important in the Waldorf schools we exchange, that the teachers learn from each other. So their conferences, workshops, publications, lectures, all sorts of things, where we learn and develop what we call the curriculum. But it's not a curriculum in the state sense. You must teach that then and there. As Bardana said, you teach the child. And that's the big difference. It's child-centered, child-focused, because the children are the co-creators of our world. We're not just doing it to them, we're doing it with them. And through that way, the teacher's also a learner. The teacher's learning all the time. And if the parent thinks about it, not just teaching their children, they should stop sometimes and say, what have I learned from my child? What have I learned from my child today? Because then we develop a respect for them, for their childhood. And out of that, we can build an education which is about relationships. And science is also about relationships. There's a wonderful phrase by Martin Buber, very simple, but world-shattering. He said, in the beginning is relation. In the beginning is relation. So that for the child, it's not just the personal relationships with their parents or carers or teachers, or whatever. It's also the relationship with what they learn, because that's what stays with you. If you do maths to a high level at school, 10 years later, gone. Do you remember it? But what you do remember is the teacher, the good teacher, the teacher who recognized you for who you were. In that relationship, relationships stay within us and also influence a lot of our behavior and our prejudices and the way we live later. It's not what we learn, it's how we learn. And so the science is very much, in the early years, very much that how rather than the what. And later on, when we become more adult, in adolescence, we develop our intellectual faculties, we begin to make judgments, then we can build the abstractions and say, do you remember when you did that? Now, this is what was behind that. And these are the laws of thermodynamics or whatever later on. When the child leaves a Waldorf school, they know the same as everyone else, the sciences, but they felt differently about it. They can pass examinations, yes, and they do well because it's arts rich. But at the same time, there's something inwardly that's connected them to the world, a respect for the world, a respect for other people, a respect for other children. And that we can develop that also in the science lessons as well as in the maths, as well as in the arts, rather. Yeah.
That gives us some light, surely. Vandana ma'am, there's a question for you too. So the question is, what are the things and aspects that can be? Sorry, not this one. The question is that from parents who do not have, let's say, artistic inclinations or abilities, how can they nurture that in a child's environment at home?
This is a very interesting question because, yes, so many of us have grown up in a way where we realized and told ourselves that I'm not good at this and I'm not good at that. But I guess the best way to help your children become artistic is to take up that art for yourself and begin as a fresh learner, because you're not really about making your child an expert in that art. But what it is that is significant in this process is that the child learns to take up something which appears threatening in the beginning. That's how the parent is asking this question, right? Because I'm not an artist and I don't know how to do it. It's threatening. It's very vulnerable to show that I don't know, but you don't have to worry about those things. Just begin. Because I think children are the most forgiving beings on this earth. Moment to moment, they just keep forgetting all the things that went wrong. The moment they feel good, like Christopher said, it's all about the experience. The moment they experience an achievement, they have forgotten what was left behind. We have to be able to recreate ourselves for our children. I think that's the biggest capacity that we are giving our children, where when tomorrow is not anticipated, it's not as per our designs, we are always day to day subjected with uncertainties. The only capacity that we can work with is, how do we work with uncertainties? How do we work with what we don't know? How do we make something that did not exist before, but I have room to work with that now? So that is possibly the only answer I can give to this person. Don't be afraid, just start.
And then
Can I just
also, yes, Dr. Leena, sure, sure.
yeah.
Yes.
No, but I mean, what I understand, because creativity or art is, it's not. I don't think creativity is equal to art as such. Okay, or painting. I think when we talk about creativity, is a new way of doing anything. Doesn't have to be Nobel Prize winning. It doesn't have to be a earth-shattering invention. It doesn't have to be an amazing painting. It is anything which makes our lives simpler or more interesting. So, there's a story about Sir Isaac Newton, that when he was working on his science experiments, there was his cats were kept on scratching on the door, and that was interrupting his chain of thoughts, one. And second was, he had to keep on opening the door, and it was interrupting his light experiment, apparently. So what he did was, he went and he called his carpenter and asked him to make a hole in the door, and that's where the cat door was created. Okay, and it is as important for him, I'm sure, because that cat door led to other inventions which he did. So I think every small thing which we do to make our life better, easier, interesting, would be creativity. I don't see creative because I'm not a good painter, or I'm not a good artist. But if in my work I have to do to be creative, if I have to explain, when a parent comes to me something which is very complex neurodevelopmental kind of thing in a very simple way, that's creativity for me. Okay, so I think we can be creative in whatever we are good at. It So in my eyes, creativity is opposite of copy paste. Okay, whatever is not copy pasted is whatever we are thinking, what was original is creativity. So I don't think we need to be worried about that I'm not a good painter or an artist and how am I going to support my. I think there are different ways in which a parent can support their child in the creative process.
But I should say, I use an example. You've used Isaac Newton. I'd like to use Gandhi as an example. There's a lovely story when he was trying to get onto a train and his sandal fell off from his foot and it fell under the train. What did he do? He didn't scrabble around to try and pick up the sandal. He took his other sandal off and threw it under the train and got on the train and went. That's creativity. that most spontaneous moment when you do something that's not normal, something comes to you. And in this case, it's also very ethical, because one sandal is no use to anybody, but two sandals are. And I find that we can call the creative moment, yeah, that comes out of his personality, but it's sort of light. That's what I do. So I think we have to respect those moments in our lives, and we can learn them from our children. And that's why I work for this Alliance for Childhood, because we all contain that within us still in a different form. As adults, we're more conscious, we're more inhibited, but we still have some of those qualities. We can still wonder, we still have imagination, we can still trust, and just, try and overcome the cynicism of the modern world. That's childhood. So children encapsulate childhood, and as adults, we can learn from and play with them. Just get on the floor, play with them, enter into their world of imagination, and you will find a creativity in yourself that you've always forgotten.
Thank you, all of you. And
I would like to add something here, Ritu. Allow me to just, compliment what wonderful inputs have just come right now, because it's an opportunity and I don't want to miss this. So when we talk of creativity, we are talking about being, very original, being so spontaneous that you didn't really have to work through a process to arrive there. You borrowed something which was already living inside you in a subtle way. And the moment when Christopher said he threw away the second sandal, because he realized that I have nothing to do with this one, but the other who has probably got the first one will benefit by having the second one. This cannot be a design thinking kind of a process. It's just spontaneously done. But there are certain attributes when it comes to nurturance, when it comes to children and childhood, and because I'm working with this all the time, that I feel that it needs to be brought to the fore when there is an audience who wants to understand. I want to take the aspect of, the concept of creative thinking, and oftentimes what I get to hear from many parents is, the world of education has a lot of element of art in it. But what about the sciences? And I think Ritu, you also tapped on that question. Well, if you want to understand about scientific thinking, then I think if we try to get more structured in this, we look at 4 levels in which scientific thinking goes through. There is inquiry, analysis, inference, and argument. But for me, it is the first step in itself which is the challenge. So when it comes to the question of inquiry, I feel that most of the time, in the larger context of childhood today, getting children into a mind of inquiry, a mindset of inquiry, and I'm talking about generally overall across the globe, I think that has become a problem because of some of the things that Dr. Leena said, where children's days are so tied up with so many things that they don't have time to get bored. Out of the boredom, the need to create something, to look at something passively, and then get charged up to understand what is this that is happening here. One thing that I once heard from someone was that today our lives are getting so smart and so clean that we are dumbing our children. Now, when this was said, the context was, look at our homes today. All our wirings are concealed wirings, the electrical wirings. And if a child wants to even understand what is the source from where this button is getting its electricity, I have no evidence individually and independently for my eyes to follow a line to come to that source of electricity in my house. I have a remote control in my hand. As a child, I don't know why pressing this button is making that television work. But in the past, when life was not so, what we call it, smart, children had more opportunity to experience science in the living. So someone had to go to the television and manipulate those devices there, the buttons, tuning it finer or whatever. Our eyes could follow the wire lines and find out things for ourselves. Boredom allows us to go into those spaces which generally in the fast-paced life we don't have time for. But the first element of inquiry that I'm talking about can only happen when one, life is a little slow, two, when we are able to trigger interest, when a child gets interested. And the third aspect of it is when the child is able to hold attention. So, world of education, world of schools, as some of you who are sitting here in the audience, and Ritu, you will also understand, is very slow. It has no television, it has no media, it has no electronic devices. The pace of learning is slow, conducive to the evolving age of the child. It is also about building interest. And we do this so tactfully. The teachers are so efficient at creating this interest through the craft of storytelling. We move their will and we engage them so deeply. And then in this storytelling process, the way we hold their attention and we work with their attention spans and we help them grow their attention spans, all these things are contributing and complementing into the scientific spaces. You know, if you want to talk of it as scientific inquiry, scientific thinking, if this preliminary is not there, then we talk about when, like Christopher said, at a higher space, when the body of science that the child has acquired through the growing classrooms has evolved enough, we can come into a space of analytics. We can come and analyze and then use inferences and have an argument building up on it. And that stage comes at the right time. But before all this can happen, what we are seeing today is in the outside world, children are struggling with attention. They are struggling with the space of, slowing down. They're not able to work or hold their interest in one thing for a longer time. And we really need to understand this is happening because of all the games they play on their devices, because of all the media that is so flashy and the multimedia, which kind of is so stimulating in the moment that anything less stimulating is working against the child. So I think that before we go into the big talks of scientific thinking and all that, we need to really see how do we even make that available to children? And at what stages are we beginning to work with that?
That was comprehensive, Vandana. Coming back to Dr. Leena, can you maybe, in the interest of parents more, sum up the initial years of the child in terms of the child's environment? Like, what would you recommend? See, because a pair, like I say, there of course now there are many courses in parenting, etc. But there's no textbook. The child becomes the manual. So, and then from there on, we sort of endow that task on ourselves that we have to teach and train. So, what is it that in 0 to 7, broadly, the child's environment should be like, which allows full nurturance?
I think the first thing is in the early developmental age. What we talked about neuroplasticity, what that neuroplasticity means that the brain is always learning, but it learns whatever is repeated, whether it is good or bad, whether it's helpful or unhelpful. The young brain can't decipher that. So it is up to the adults in the child's environment to provide the right kind of stimulation, give the right kind of opportunities to foster imagination and creativity. However, as our guests have already said, because of various reasons, the busy lifestyles, the increased focus on academics, the various competitive activities and exams, the fear of missing out by parents, everything is overloaded and nobody has time or energy for play. And I think if there is one message that I really want to go across is that the excessive exposure, Vandana ma'am has already talked about this, to mobiles and passive screen time is in my words poisonous to our children's development. And I really use the word poisonous very strongly with my parents, simply because it's a hidden thing. See, when you talk about alcohol addiction, drug addiction, it's very obvious. We know the ill effects, but the ill effects of excessive screen time, passive watching on the young brain, we cannot see, and we don't know the effect. So I think we need to be very careful the guidelines are very clear, which have been given by us, created by doctors. No handheld device till 2 years of age at least, and after that also max 1 to half an hour, 1 hour maximum, with content strictly monitored. See, when we talk about development in a child, we talk about serve and return. We talk about this interaction. This is this serve and return concept, where a child says something, and the parent or an adult in his environment returns and interacts, and that kind of starts building the serve and return concept, which enhances brain development. With a mobile, there is no serve and return. It is just one way passive. So I think we need to be we need to be aware about this. Apart from this, it does take away from the real playtime, other effects, physical fitness, behavioral issues. Speech delays become so common because a child doesn't need to speak to a screen. The screen keeps on speaking. So I think we need to be very aware about these kind of ill effects of screen time on our child's brain, and be give alternatives for the child, to foster creativity and imagination. The other thing which I usually say, as parents, we are always very protective of our children. At the first sign of distress, we tend to rush to solve their problems. I think we need to learn to resist this urge. We need to resist solving problems for them. May it simply be a toddler reaching out for his ball, which has gone under the sofa, or it might be an older child wanting some help dealing with his peer. Now, of course, parents, teachers are always there to help them, but let them talk, let them come up with solutions. Let us not give them ready made solutions, because ultimately, a most important life skill, which is resilience in life, which builds up emotional quotient. Emotional quotient, resilience builds not from successes, but from failures. Failing and then bouncing back higher than before is what resilience is. And it is not an inbuilt or inborn skill, it is something which can be taught to the child. But that's where the whole parenting skill about not rushing in, not giving ready-made solutions, and letting the child create his own solutions, but be there around to make sure that the child is doing the right things, is what might help resilience develop, which is a really important life skill. Few other things, haphazard, random things which I see in my clinic is, or which I see with different schooling techniques, is making a child simply hold a pencil to write without the prerequisites of fine motor control coming in. Now, this is going to set up for not only disappointment, failure, but a lot of frustration for the child and the parent. So the schools have to be also very careful about this age appropriateness. And I understand the Waldorf system, but I think in most schools, this is what is happening. Younger and younger children are, forced with a pencil in their hands and made to do beautiful writings. And when that doesn't happen, a lot of frustration sets in. Not giving children the space and opportunity to play, have physical play. And there are many reasons. I mean, we've discussed all the reasons. But then after doing this, we say that the child has very poor balance, the child has very poor coordination, and then the child needs some occupational therapy or something. So I think we need to really think about that in the early years. How are we giving the children space and opportunity to develop not only in their intellectual skills, in their cognitive, but also physical, fine motor, language understanding, etc. Rote learning without understanding the concept is only going to give us an illusion of academic progress. Simple examples are, in the first few years, a child is made to learn the spellings of a number. So I find children who can write 50 because they have written 50 times. But then he has no understanding of number concept. What does 3 mean or 4 means? So a child is able to write 50, but doesn't, if you tell him, go bring 3 tomatoes from the fridge, he doesn't know what 3 means. So what are we doing with, what kind of this learning and academics is going in the wrong direction? I find that so much of focus is given on learning 5 animal names, 5 vegetable names, 5 color names. Children know names like rhinoceros, alligators, broccoli, and a child may not know what or who his aunt or uncle is. Or a child might be able to do 50-piece puzzle, and then we say the child has poor social skills because the child is doing that and his puzzle the whole day at home. So that is ridiculous. So what I'm trying to say is the child's brain will learn what is presented to it. So I think that's where we need to be going. Again, through stories, children learn. Now, instead of making them somebody recite a story of a hare and tortoise, we could ask them to change the ending or change the middle and see where, creatively where the stories might end up. So there are so many speech and drama classes where it is just recitation classes, not speech and drama. It's recitation. Recitation is rote learning. Fine, understand it has its own place. But in imagination, creativity to make it fun, why don't we ask children to do something a little bit different with the story and let them come with nonsense? It doesn't matter. But then that's where the creativity and imagination might start. So I think that's where I look at it should be fun, it should be wholesome. The child should be looking forward to go to school every day because it's fun. And it should not be, when the parents tell me the child doesn't want to go to school, that's a very sad situation. I think that's what I would like to say.
That was a brilliant list of things, Dr. Leena. It's quite the things that a Waldorf school aims to work at. I'll just give you everyone hearing this a quick example because my younger child is in grade 1, and the numbers are introduced through art and stories. And first, the quality of number is spoken to. So they don't go 1 to 20 by the end of stick. They understand what is 1, that I am 1, and so on. And this starts at the age of 6 or 7. So the receptivity after all these 6 years of physical play, of sensory development, so they're ready to, once they understand what is 1, then they are taught to write and so on. So it's really, really, like, you nailed all aspects of, I think, it's very reassuring even for existing Waldorf parents to hear what you're saying. Like a 3-year-old I knew was given a mark less in school because they said, what does the cow say? And she said, hamba, because that's what she heard the cow hear. But they're supposed to write, the cow says moo, moo. She never heard the cow say moo. So,
so I think we need to look at those things.
Framework of our current education system in that sense. And this then takes other versions from grade 1 to 10. I'm just mentioning an example. So, just give me a second. There is something. Yeah. Sorry. So many beautiful things have been said by all of you. Christopher, I would take one more opportunity to ask you. You mentioned a beautiful thing in your talk, that art and creativity takes courage, because it may not be the easiest thing. And when we have to bend backwards and forwards with it, that's what creates resilience. That's what makes us explorative and curious and so on. Can you tell us more about that? Because that is also, if we go by the dictionary definition of what is a scientific temperament, or what they call in the startup world today, agility and innovation, thinking out of the box, that's exactly it is. So how does that work? Like, can you tell us how creativity also builds that courage and resilience? Is it difficult for you to unmute? Let me just ask the back-end person to. Just 1 second. Huh? Devrup, if you can hear us, can you please unmute Christopher? Is it not working? Okay. Just 1 second. Are you finding it hard to see? Could you type it for us on the chat window on the side? Could you see the chat window, Christopher?
There it is. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
The button vanished,
yes.
But
No worries.
it's a risk. art is a risk. You take risks. You don't know whether you're going to manage. And as you work, you develop, you change. You're looking at yourself, but you're also communicating to other human beings, your fellow human beings, doing a drawing or singing. There's a sense of communication, of expression. So it's intrinsic, inward. You're learning about yourself, what you can and cannot do. You have a challenge you have to overcome. And when you overcome that challenge, there'll be a new challenge that you didn't expect. And you have to face that one. And at the same time, you are communicating that to others. If you think of dance or theatre or whatever. I've noticed when I was a teacher, one of the biggest pedagogical impact on young people, I taught adolescents, was when we did theatre, when we did a play. You would see in the whole process of doing a play, the young person change. But also there was an element of doubt, fear. You know, I have to stand up there and all the parents will be in the hall and I will have to speak and I might forget my words and the other person doesn't give me the right cue. All these elements of tension come and then it resolves itself and they do a play. And then that sense of achievement after taking all those risks and working as a community. Because when you do theatre, everybody's important, whether they're doing the lighting or whatever, everybody, they have to come together. And that for a young person is a big experience. When you ask class 12 from Steiner schools, when they're finished, they're 18, and you ask them, what do you remember from being at school? And they would all say the same two things, the plays and the outings. Going out, going on journeys together and doing plays, because that's such a deep social experience. They learn about themselves as an individual, they learn about others. And I think that's the role of the arts in the school, that they develop finger skills, which of course helps the brain. There's this wonderful Greek statement, nimble fingers make nimble minds. And it's true. Yeah, they work together. So they learn these skills, but at the same time, they have to take a risk each time they do something, that it won't work and they have to find another solution. And I think that's an important life lesson for everybody. It becomes part of your attitude towards life. And just one other thing, Vandana mentioned the word interest. Simple word, but it's so important. Because I think our social world is based on interest. If you look at all the catastrophes, all the inhumanity in which we treat other people, yeah, for reasons, whether it's history, philosophy, race, whatever, all these things come in, and it's just inexpressibly ghastly. But I think the word interest is where that can be overcome. That we are not just interested in what we learn, we're interested in other people. That interest is a basis of ethics. It's not thou shalt not, but I'm interested in you, in the difference between us, in the mosaic of human culture and all the colors and forms that we create as human beings around us. And I'm interested. And that, I think, is a very important aspect for the children too. They're born with curiosity, but we have to deepen it and extend it. Everything in our world, whether it's a physical, whether it's the sky, or whether it's my neighbor, are interesting. And to keep that interest alive, right? That's a sort of, how can I say, it's a nourishment, ethical nourishment, that there's interest. And I think so often our schooling, conventional schooling, kills that interest off. Yeah, it's only what is useful, what is utilitarian, but you don't go beyond that. And that's where the arts really bring an interest in life. Whichever they are, it takes you into a different world, and it's a world that's interesting. So it's a very simple word, but I think it's fundamental to all educational and self-development practice as well, whatever age. Thank you.
Thank you for getting us so interested in this whole conversation on education, Christopher, and Dr. Leena too. Vandana ma'am, any final closing words? We are a wee bit over time, but the conversation has been very, very rich. So I'm sure, and thank you all panelists here for cooperating with us on that too. Vandana ma'am, any final closing words?
Yes, I think with all that we have spoken about today, be it parental expectations, society issues related to policymakers and everything, one thing that we need to do as parents, as teachers, is to trust our children. We have to trust our children because the moment they see that in our eyes, their own chemistry within their body changes. From doubting themselves, they begin to trust themselves. So, trust is very contagious, and we need to be very trusting of our children. It's not that what they don't show today will not be revealed another day. We're all different, and at different points of time, our strengths come to the fore. All we need to keep doing is providing that environment which is allowing the nurturance of all aspects of childhood. The other thing that we need to, as grown-ups, take care of is the well-being of the child. And that doesn't only mean food, it means sleep. It means allowing children to be in a restful state of mind. It also means having simple but sincere conversations with your children. You don't have to talk to your children the whole day. But at the point of time when your child needs your attention and is asking for it, can you sincerely be present to your child? That is also an experience of trust for the children. It's an experience of safety, security. And since we're talking about childhood and education and school, we need to understand that education or academic education is just a part of life, and life keeps happening. The challenge for a school is that life happens in different ways in different homes every single day for every single child. The ability that a teacher comes forth with to bring all the children together at the beginning of the day, and how then she manages the whole day for the children, and how she ensures that the child is present in every part of the day, learning well and coming to a space of good health because of the environment of the school. That is very important. And the process of education should definitely be such interest building that it becomes second nature to the child, that the child becomes a lifelong learner, is a self-driven learner, because that is something we need to keep doing to ourselves. I mean, today itself, if you look at our lives, we're still learning, we're still evolving. So learning cannot come to an end. It's not a culmination, it's a journey. And definitely what Christopher said, to build on the element of interest that he brought forward. If we need to work at the future, and if we need to work at a future where humanity stands tall, then the element of empathy, which is another language for interest, another word for interest, I think we need to keep working on that in a very sincere way. And arts, I'm sure we all will witness this, experiences, that arts is one of the ways in which you bring society to the children through stories, through drama, and through so many other spaces. So I would like to end with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that Dr. Leena or Christopher, you are feeling prompted to say just spontaneously? I think we can take him there.
I think the real curriculum in the school is compassion and conscience. The wonder is our relationship to each other and the world. The compassion, the empathy, the sense of being a fellow human on this globe, and our conscience, where we have an ethical element as well. And one way I think to get there is always to remember that every human being is in the process of becoming. We are becoming. Our institutions are all becoming. And with working with our children, we become even more conscious of this becomingness. because for them it's highly visible in their behavior, their attitude, they say, how they play, how they play. They're full of becoming. But as adults, we're also becoming. We're becoming a better parent, hopefully, becoming a better teacher, becoming a more responsible citizen. All through life, we're becoming. So schools have to really become. And they're developed into a new era and not just rely on past answers to the questions of today.
Thank you, Christopher. Anything from you, Dr. Booth?
Yeah, can I just take half a minute?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, so usually when I give talks in school, I usually start with a quote from, and I thought I will use this to end the discussion towards the end. And that's a quote by Charles Dickens, where he's written The Tale of Two Cities. And he's used it in a different context, obviously, with the war and everything. But it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. Season of light, season of darkness, spring of hope, and winter of despair. So I think what I usually want to say is, when we think about our schooling times, for some of us, it was the best of the times. But we know that there were some children along with us, our peers, and even now, it was a very bad space. Okay. And I think it should not be like that. School should be a good place, a safe place, a learning place, a fun place for everybody to go to. Whenever years later you think about school, a child may not be academically excellent, but that experience of having gone through the school years should be wonderful for everybody, every child. And that's what I feel a school life should be. And that can only happen when everything is more than academics. So academics plus, that's what school is. Academics is obviously a part of school, but how to do it, and children who are not able to do it, how to adapt to those children so that those children also like to go to school, and it's not a despair of winter of despair for them when they think back many years later. So this quote really works well with our schooling system as well. So thank you for that, allowing me to say this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
On a very light note, I would like to say, here's a doctor using arts to communicate what she wants to communicate.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Everything wove itself to the larger message so beautifully, and I think there's so much to take. We missed a few questions, but I think we broadly answered them in the conversation nevertheless. Sincerely appreciate that you overstayed in terms of time, and it would be we would actually circulate the contents of this webinar in excerpts in different forms even later, so those who could not watch it could also watch a recorded session. Thank you so much for bringing the world to us in a comprehensible way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Lena.
Great conversation this morning for Sunday. Thank you.